So how does God help you overcome fear, the most destructive emotion there is?
Well, certainly not by suppressing it, as you do. Right? So what you've done is you've got these two fellas next to you who help you stay away from your fear altogether, right? Yeah. So yeah, that doesn't help you with your fear. Fear is, after a while, if we allow ourselves to feel about it, fear is just another emotion. Yeah. So fear is just another emotion, like, you know, like grief or shame or some other emotion. The problem with fear is that it is so, it's fairly insidious emotion in the sense that usually we're afraid of fear. We're so afraid to feel fear itself. And fear, when you feel it, looks pretty bad. Like, so you'll be shaking and you look like you've got Alzheimer's sometimes, you know, you'll be shaking. Or what's that other, Parkinson's disease, you know. Like when I was about 30 and going through a lot of fear, I was often asked the question from anybody who saw me, have you got Parkinson's? You know, like, no, it's just fear. You know, like you keep having to say the same thing over and over. And it's just fear that I've got to process through. And the problem with having a fear of fear is that we believe we can't experience fear. Mm-hmm. But the truth is, if you stay in your body, you will definitely be able to experience fear with God's help. You will always be able to experience fear. Fear and terror, which is the most difficult part of fear to experience. Many of us have a lot of deep terrors that have been inbuilt within us. And the reason why we have deep terrors, you know, is because we've had these situations in our life that are terrifying. You know, let's face it, most of us at some point have probably been involved in an accident, for example, of some kind. You know, whether it was as a child when we fall out of a tree or something like that. Mm-hmm. You know, they're terrifying events for us. Also, many of us have had parents who have been quite violently oppressive, you know. Like, so, you know, your mum says to you, Dad's coming home. You know, he'll give you a belt when he comes home. And what does the child do? It goes into terror for the rest of the day, waiting for the, you know, this dread of Dad coming home and giving him a whack, you know. And so we have a lot of these unhealed childhood events which cause us to believe that terror has to be prevented at all costs. When we believe and when we feel from God the help that we get, which we can get, and we're willing and open to feel the experience in our body of terror, then we will feel it. And when we feel it, it gets released from us in the process of feeling it. I sort of like an emotion being felt. It's like, if you imagine emotion like water being poured through the body, right, coming in from the top, just being poured through the body, whenever you stop the feeling of it, wherever you stop the feeling of it is where it will generally reside. So for many people with fear, they stop the feeling of it. Fear generally is felt all the way through this area here. And when we stop the feeling of it, we stop breathing, we contract our breathing. We can no longer get really deep breaths. We don't breathe into our diaphragm anymore. Most people I've met rarely breathe into their diaphragm. They usually breathe into their chest. And therefore lots of extra air isn't going into the body because we're not getting oxygenated. That causes its own problems. The fear itself is a contraction in that area, and it causes all sorts of physical ailments all through that area. When we're ready to feel our fear, when we decide we're going to feel it, and it's not about sort of browbeating yourself into feeling it. It's more about just letting yourself feel the body experience of it. Then the fear will just pass through you. And you'll feel it pass through you, like you'll go through the experience, and when you come out the other side, you enter a state of peace. And it's not a temporary state of peace, where it's just happened that one day. It will be a permanent state of peace, where you realise the next day it's not there either. The next day it's not there either. The next day it's not there either. And that's when you know you've actually released that particular terror or that particular fear. The problem is that most of us have a fear of feeling fear. Yes. And so we shut that down. We want other people around us to nurse us through the process of fear. We usually then attract spirits around us who try to help us avoid our fear, and in the end we have all these barriers to experiencing fear. Unfortunately, fear is above our grieving emotions as well, and so we never get to experience our grief either, which means we never get to really change. So many people live their entire life on earth with lots of grief in them, with a lot of fear covering over the top of that grief, and it's only in the spirit world, after they've been in the spirit world many years, that they finish up releasing some of that. The fear of death is still, and particularly the fear of a violent death, is probably mankind's greatest fear still on the planet. And it locks up the entire body in many cases.